you see those slides? Great. Great. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. Our agenda, as you all have adopted it, includes kind of a refresh of the subcommittee. You all should be fairly familiar with all of that. You've seen it before, but just to remind us what we're all doing here and what's going on with the coastal plan. I have some updates on our outreach and engagement strategy that I'll share, and then we will get into the main business of today, which is new business recommendations for future planning. So you all know we've been talking about developing recommendations for several months now, and so we're excited to finally start that in our meeting today. And then we'll have opportunity for any additional comments from the subcommittee. Of course, public comment will occur 20 minutes before the end of the meeting, so at 11:40. We'll discuss any action items and scheduling and then adjourn. For today's meeting, since it will be more of a kind of a brainstorm and a workshopping session with members, I just want to remind everyone, folks from the public that are joining, we're so grateful that you are here to observe the meeting. Please do kind of keep your ideas and any comments you have on the discussion for the end of the meeting at the public comment portion, when we would love to hear any feedback or recommendations you want to add to what we've been working on throughout the course of the meeting. So jumping into that subcommittee overview, just some reminders on what we're doing with the coastal plan. So this coastal resilience master plan is a place-specific plan for mitigating severe and repetitive flooding. So we need to incorporate all major flood hazards, include a comprehensive risk assessment, and include information on projects that are being implemented in the region. So our final products will include a flood hazard exposure model, flood hazard impact assessment. We'll be looking at that plan resilience projects and initiative inventory, developing some information on financial needs for flood resilience, and then of course the TAC subcommittee recommendations. We're working to deliver all of this by December of this year, and for code, this plan needs to be updated every 5 years. So the objectives of this subcommittee, you all have seen these before, primarily to help inform our outreach engagement that we're doing for this plan, and also to strengthen relationships with our key stakeholders. And then lastly, as we'll be working on today, you all are helping us to develop recommendations for future planning. For schedule, so meetings since last year, we have 3 meetings remaining, including today's meeting. We'll be working on developing recommendations at this meeting and then the next 2 meetings, and I'll talk a little bit more about the process for that in the next couple of slides. All right, so some general updates. We're excited to announce that we have hired 2 consulting teams who are helping out with this planning process, in addition to the Dewberry team that has been on board. So we have Stantec and Launch both here in the room today. They will be helping with report design and production, stakeholder engagement, including the TAC recommendations facilitation, data review and analysis, and helping us to do our inventory plan resilience actions. And that includes technical assistance to our end users, localities, planning district commissions, tribal governments, and others to help them submit projects to our Web Explorer and make sure that those projects and initiatives are included in the plan. The AECOM team will be developing, and then implementing our public outreach campaign. That includes the underserved community meetings, and also identifying underserved communities as part of this plan, but also for the statewide flood protection master plan. So I just want to give the Launch and the Stantec team a chance to say hello to everybody.
Hi, so I'm Linda Warren, and I'll be leading our facilitations a bit later today. We've got a whole facilitation team here with us. And so in the room, we have Rebecca Cazares and Joe Gerard, as well as Ashley. Hi. So from Stantec, and we're going to be able to help with the recommendation pieces, but we also have 2 members online. Cece, do you want to introduce yourself online?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Cece Atkinson, also with Launch Consulting. Excited to be here to help gather information from you all today.
Morgan.
Yep, good morning. I'll be working with Cece on the virtual end.
Our consultant team.
Thank you. And then we also have a representative from AECOM here. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Claire Stone with AECOM and helping with the identification of underserved communities and writing or by just kind of listening in today.
Wonderful, thank you all for being here. Okay, so I'm gonna dive into the outreach and engagement strategy updates for this plan. So the goals that we've established for outreach and engagement for the Coastal Resilience Master Plan Phase 2 are to understand how this plan can be leveraged for intended end users, to better contextualize our content with qualitative data on flood impacts, so not just our quantitative modeling, but also how are those impacts felt in communities and what sort of stories exist alongside them. Contextualizing the plan's content with information on planned and ongoing interventions. So this is really our planned resilience actions analysis and development of that projects and initiatives inventory. And then lastly, driving awareness of and empowering whole community action toward coastal flood resilience. And this is our outreach strategy that is primarily focused on public outreach and education in the works. So all of this work is informing our various products that you see on the screen here that I described in the prior slide. So here's our list of outreach and engagement activities that we have planned, and you all have seen this before. We've got a variety that are in progress already. These meetings, for example, we also have our monthly NGO coordination meetings. We also have a couple of others that are
Sorry.
including end users that was released earlier this year, and we shared the results with you all last meeting, and then also the Flood Story app, which I shared at our last meeting. So what we're working towards in the next couple of months in particular are our local government meetings. So that line 6 there, locality meetings. Those meetings will be hosted between next week, in May through mid-June, and we'll be meeting with 4 different groups of localities from 3 different planning district commissions: Creator Planning District Commission, Plan RVA, and Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. The other major activity that we're working toward at the moment, which will be completed by the end of August, are our underserved community meetings, and there we have AECOM currently working on taking the lead to develop a list of recommended underserved community areas, geographies to meet with based on both kind of social vulnerability conditions as well as flood risk analysis. So we'll be really kicking that off in the next month or so to organize and schedule those meetings. A little bit later on, we'll have more activities like our public webinars, our additional stakeholder meetings, including private sector meeting and a federal facility owners meeting, hosting some additional PDC interviews, and then of course public comment on the plan after this released. At our last meeting, I asked subcommittee members if they had any requests for specific information that would help to inform development of subcommittee recommendations. And one of the requests was to develop kind of a status of where we're at with engaging these different stakeholders. So you remember, I think at our first meeting or our second meeting, we did an exercise to try to identify stakeholders that had a high level of interest and influence in this kind of realm of what we're doing with the coastal plan. And this is a list of the types of stakeholders that were identified as part of that process. So we included all of those in our outreach and engagement strategy, and have been trying to reach all of these folks with our various activities, and this is a status of where we're at with accomplishing that engagement level. The different agencies or organizations at the top of this, under the blue section, involve and collaborate, are most interested in influential stakeholders that we're trying to involve most closely in the planning process. And then the folks at the bottom, those different stakeholder groups under consult and inform, are still engaged in the process, and we're seeking their feedback, but are in a less collaborative manner. So you can see all of the activities in bold text are either complete or ongoing. And the ones that are not are plans, and some of them including state councils and working groups as part of the forthcoming public outreach campaign. So I think we've had relatively good success in what we've done so far. I think most of the areas where we still have opportunity for improvement are areas where we still have planned actions. A couple of exceptions to that. I think in general, we've had some challenges getting state agencies, tribal governments, and federal partners to use the Coastal Resilience Web Explorer to share information on their projects and initiatives. So thinking back to that gathering, kind of contextualizing the plan with what's already ongoing. I think that's been somewhat of a challenge that we're trying to address through our technical assistance and data improvement plan for the projects and initiatives inventory. Secondly, I think gathering feedback from tribal governments on how to represent their needs and perspectives in the plan. We have some tribal governments who are very engaged and participate heavily, and others who are less so. And of course, we know each is their own sovereign nation, and so thinking about how to continue to conduct outreach to tribal governments is maybe something the subcommittee might want to consider as part of this recommendations development. And then finally, I think there are challenges in having a plan with an abbreviated timeline for development, and just we're doing a lot in a short amount of time, and so being able to gather feedback and apply it to our products is an ongoing, I think, challenge for any planning process, including this one. So in terms of next steps, I kind of spoke about these a little bit in the slides before, but our next steps for the next couple of months include those locality meetings, our supplementation of our Plan Versus Lanes actions from the WebEx, developing and launching our public outreach campaign. And then one that I didn't mention, but that is important, is continuing to work with the critical infrastructure working group to share information about what we're doing with this plan with our critical infrastructure partners. With that, I want to ask if there's any questions or comments or feedback based on that outreach and engagement strategy update for the current plan development. And for those online, feel free to unmute yourself and contribute to the discussion.
Yeah, this is Joe Howell with the Navy. I just want to make a comment about engagement with federal partners. Just want to make it clear that the projects that the Navy has identified with our communities here in Hampton Roads, we've worked with the PDC and localities to make sure the projects were identified for the portal. So I just want to make sure that all the committee, subcommittee, and the consultants are aware that our projects that we've identified with the community partners have been, included in the database, both physical as well as capacity building projects.
Thank you, Joe. Any other comments from those online or in the room? Okay, great. Well, if not, then I will go ahead and move us along to new business, which is subcommittee recommendations. So I'm going to do a little bit of setting the stage here, and then I'm going to turn it over to the launch team to facilitate us through our discussion and exercise today. So this is the first time that we're really digging into the subcommittee recommendations. I wanted to share a bit more information on what we're hoping to achieve and how these subcommittee recommendations will be used, so that you all have that context as you go into this exercise. The purpose of these recommendations should be to identify opportunities to improve the mitigation of severe and repetitive flooding in the coastal region. So that might include actions that need to be implemented prior to our next plan development, so over the next 1 to 4 years. And they could also be recommendations to inform the next planning process. So as we go to update the plan, for our 5-year update and develop it again, what sort of improvements might we want to consider? The recommendations can be for a variety of different audiences, including state government, PDCs, local governments, and others. So they can be recommendations for DCR, but they don't all need to be recommendations for DCR. And we want to kind of generally identify the intended audience, given the amount of time that we have to develop these recommendations, being only 3 2-hour meetings and what we can accomplish in between. We anticipate that there won't be enough time to get into very, very detailed specifics in terms of, individual agencies or individual actors. So we want to keep it fairly high level in terms of the intended audience being, for example, state agencies rather than the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. We're hoping to have between 3 to 5 recommendations per subcommittee, really strong, solid recommendations. And then those recommendations will be presented as a section of the final plan document, again, presented as recommendations of this public. For our process, this is intended to be a collaborative process. The launch team will help us in this and facilitate discussions and help keep us moving and on topic and all of that. We do want this to be informed by our prior discussions, and as we've kind of set up our exercise for today, we have looked back at our prior meeting minutes and other stakeholder engagement that we've done. For example, our end user survey results, and tried to build that into a starting point for the discussion, the themes that we'll be using for the recommendations. The final recommendations that are developed will be voted on by subcommittee members, followed by the full TAC. So you can see kind of the phase process here from our Q2 meeting here in green with the subcommittee. We'll start brainstorming and prioritizing our draft recommendations this meeting. At our next meeting, we'll review and revise those recommendations, and then at the end, we will then finalize and vote those recommendations. You'll see it going to the TAC at the end. We're also hoping to share updates with the TAC along the way. So we're not anticipating that the full TAC is going to be seeing these recommendations for the first time at the Q4 meeting, but that will have some information sharing in between. So just some background materials and information that we recommend you all keep in mind as we work to develop these recommendations. Firstly, we do have phase 1 TAC recommendations. For those in the room, there's a couple of handouts at the back next to the name tags, which have those printed out in there. There were recommendations developed as part of the phase 1 plan in 2021. So that can be a starting point. Those aren't going to be included word for word in this plan. So if there's something you like in there that you really want to continue over into phase 2, make sure to repeat that during today's kind of process of brainstorming. Please also keep in mind the subcommittee objectives and our prior discussions, the end user survey results, public comments from phase 1, and then I have some additional materials to share with you all that we've pulled together to help this conversation along with that, or the slides, which include the landscape of existing non-governmental organizations, outreach activities, existing flood resilience plans in the region, and then existing grant funding distributed across the region. And all of these materials are, many of these materials, I should say, are both in the slides, but also in the materials. So if you go to the agenda for this meeting, there's a link to meeting materials in there. And that has a PDF that has a lot of this information in there. So for those online, if you want to pull that up and reference it as we go through recommendations, it might be helpful. Okay, so we did ask our non-governmental organizations that join us on our monthly call, primarily environmental nonprofits. You can see the list of organizations that we've received responses from on the right. We asked them what sort of flood resilience outreach activities they're already doing, particularly for public audiences. The responses we got, again, are included in that list of materials. There's a table of all of those, but I wanted to quickly summarize some of the takeaways that I have. Firstly, kind of understanding this is only a limited subset of the ongoing activities. We realize this is not a comprehensive list of all of the activities that are going on, but we hope it's still somewhat useful for thinking about the existing activities. The primary kind of locations where we have activities are listed on the slide here, so I won't name them. But I think I can say that we're lacking connections in several of the major areas. Firstly, Northern Virginia. That's a huge part of this that's missing, except for Alexandria, and I guess some people say Fredericksburg is in Northern Virginia, but that kind of whole region lacking deep connections with nonprofits and other organizations there, as well as Northern Neck, the Greater Richmond region, Crater PDC, and Western Hampton Roads. So you can see the list of ongoing and planned activities here. So education and awareness building, engagement and decision-making, and technical assistance are all being carried out and supported by non-governmental organizations, sometimes in partnership with governments and sometimes not. But I guess my major takeaway here is that a lot of these organizations, particularly the social and environmental nonprofit organizations, are playing a significant role in supporting flood resilience action in partnership or supporting the variety of. For the grant awards to localities, here's a map of those. Again, this is something that was requested as a resource that would be helpful at our last meeting. So this includes DCR's Community Flood Preparedness Fund, as well as VDEM's grant flood mitigation assistance and HMGP hazard mitigation grant program. assistance awards to cities and counties only. So we did not include PDCs in this map because most PDCs do receive funding for hazard mitigation plan development, and we didn't want that to distract from the rest of the data here. So you can see kind of the distribution of funding for projects throughout the region, and maybe unsurprisingly, Virginia Beach and Norfolk come to the top, followed by Fairfax, and Hampton is receiving the most amount of funding for this type of work. And this is limited to flood mitigation activities. This does not include all invasive mitigation activities. And then lastly, the flood resilience plans. So here's a map of the approved flood resilience plans by DCR in green. And then in yellow is areas where the community flood preparedness funds have been awarded for planning activities. So you can see that distribution. Of course, this is statewide, but we're focused on the coastal region. We've got concentration of approved plans, particularly in the Rhodes region in Northern Virginia, and then less throughout the rest of the region. Many are under development, for example, on the eastern shores. Got a lot of plans under development. Okay, so at this point, having reviewed that background information and kind of the process that we'll go through and the purpose of the recommendations, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Launch, who is going to take the lead on facilitating us through recommendations. Oh,
Great. So, can everybody hear me? And online, we're going to actually do an interactive discussion. So we have 2 members in the room, and we have, I believe, 6 members online. Is that right?
2, 3, 4, 5, 7.
7 members online. Okay. So there may be one whose name I have not yet seen, but we're going to do some discussions around recommendations. And I'm going to give you some clues right now about how this will all play out. So we'll have a discussion time for just about an hour that will involve a few different themes for recommendations, getting ideas from everyone, members of the public. If you're there and listening and have ideas, go ahead and jot those down. And then about 11:40 will be the time that we will call for you to talk about some ideas and anything that you're thinking of as well. So for recommendation development, today's activities, there are a few. So here's how we're going to play out the next hour. We're going to first review and refine some draft themes. We'll show them to you in just a minute. And we'll do that as a group. Then we're going to individually brainstorm some recommendation ideas. In the room, we have some sticky notes for you. If you're online, we're going to ask that you use the chat function. We'll practice doing that in just a minute too, to make sure you're able to get to your chat function if you're a member online. And again, that's just for members. So the public, you can keep comments and then give those in the end. Then we'll do some small group discussion. And since so many of you are online and there's just 2 of us in the room, that might be a larger group discussion than a small group discussion today. We'll see how that can play out. We'll see how talkative you get. So after that, we definitely want to discuss recommendations as a group. And in the end, we're going to give you a chance to do some voting. And we have a special way of doing that online. And here in the room, I have the good old-fashioned way of giving you big markers that you can vote on for what's on the room and flip chart. So that's how that will roll out for the next hour. Does anybody have questions, comments? Okay. Great. So when thinking about the recommendation topics, this is the outreach and coordination subcommittee. And in that case, you have a few topic areas that you really want your recommendations to focus on. So you won't get into some of the technical recommendations that the other subcommittees will get into. In your case, thinking about strengthening relationships with the key stakeholders. And those key stakeholders have been identified as critical in engaging in this process. You also want to identify sustainable outreach and engagement goals and strategies for the state to support to build coastal resilience beyond the phase 2 plan. And you want to make sure you're continuing recommendations that will develop locality capacity and needs assessment approaches. This is kind of like the snapshot to give you an area of what you want to be thinking about. So I'll let you read that slide for a second, for a little bit longer, because sometimes just talking makes it hard to think. So consider these topics. Great, and go to the next slide. So here are some themes that are draft themes. So this is up to you. If you're thinking about recommendations that you want to put out there, do these topics work to generally cover the types of recommendations we want to be talking about? And so the first thing, we're going to go into these in more detail, is encouraging plan uptake. Second theme, enhancing coordination. And third theme, understanding our stakeholders. You may have ideas for other themes as well. So we can go through and think about these different themes and see what you think. What are your thoughts about these 3 topics as themes that make sense? So if you're thinking of recommendations, encouraging those to use the plan, encouraging plan uptake, enhancing coordination, and understanding our stakeholders. Does anybody have thoughts right now about these themes? Any comments? And then we'll go into some more slides in more detail in a second. And so I might call on you some as well. So just be prepared if you can unmute your mic, if that's okay. But does anyone have thoughts that come to them who wants to speak first? And if you have a question about the themes or a question about anything, you can ask that too. So Cameron, since you're here in the room, I'll just ask you, I'm gonna pick on you for a second. Do these themes make sense?
Yeah, I think they do, and I really can only speak with respect to working within tribal government, but I definitely think enhancing coordination and understanding stakeholders is key for specifically for engaging with tribal nations, because of their unique status as sovereign governments. I think being able to approach conversations with the right wording may seem insignificant, but is actually critical to developing that relationship. So I have a couple thoughts related to it.
Great. So when we get to the recommendations in a second, you can put those thoughts on some sticky notes. That'll be really good. But that does fit under understanding our stakeholders, you think?
Yeah.
Great. How about you, Greg? Do these themes work for you? You're thinking about the committee and what we would be covering? And are there any other themes that you would want to add? If Greg can unmute.
Sorry, the audio is a little broken on my end. There's a bit of echo in the room, so I wasn't sure if you were calling my name or not. But yeah, I have no idea what you just said right there. So, but as I got your previous question, yeah, I think the themes overall are good. I was trying to think around one, whether or not it was nested in the other as far as identifying our gaps or knowing what our gaps were, kind of a limitation piece of it. But I think that's probably consistent throughout all of those. I don't know if it would necessitate another theme.
That's a really nice thought. So when you're thinking about gaps, Greg, do you think it'll be okay, and anybody, do you think it'll be okay to put gaps under those other 3 categories rather than have a category about gaps? Seems to work.
Yeah, I'm thinking it probably bridges across all of them. With the first comment, as far as, especially in the last one, kind of understanding our stakeholders. I think as we're going through that and developing, that theme, I think some gaps will, kind of naturally fall out of that one especially, but the other ones also. So at this point, unless it becomes, one where there's so many items that we want to make it another theme, I think just keeping it in mind, a frame of reference as we're looking through those. Over.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. How about Ian? Do you have any thoughts about the themes? Do these work?
They work. I'm curious, will we go into more detail, like encourage, enhance, understand? These are like in Bloom's taxonomy, like on the lower implementation side? And are we looking for like administrative recommendations, regulatory, legislative, fiscal, like within these buckets to like be a little bit more quantified?
Very good. I'm really glad you asked that question, because yes, all of the above. So the idea about doing recommendations, it could be in any aspect. So it could involve something you want the General Assembly to do. It could involve something you want DCR to do. And you can get a bit more specific with that.
Right.
And on the next slide, once we get into approving these themes, on the next slide, we'll kind of give you some examples of a recommendation, what it could look like for each.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great. How about Joe? Any thoughts from you, Joe?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get myself off mute. Yeah, so someone mentioned previously about the gaps, and you know, I'm thinking of one particular recommendation. I think that fits under, you know, the understanding our stakeholders. Obviously, we've worked extensively with both localities and PDC, and the capacity. I think there was mentioned a bulleted highlight on capacity. And I think that is something I want to talk to in terms of recommendations, but I think it fits under that understand our stakeholders category.
Okay, great. It's great. And as you see, as you hear from each other, you start to think about different ideas. I love hearing what each of you are thinking, like kind of where your heads are going. So it's very helpful. Cameron. Oh, sorry, you're right here. I meant to say Michael.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead, Michael. Any
About
thoughts
the
about
themes.
themes?
I mean, one of the things, you know, we've been talking about is just making sure that we're able to talk to as many people as we can during the process. And I think figuring out the different nuances of, you know, the best approaches for the different communities, whether they be local governments or federal governments, just understanding the different ways to communicate more effectively towards those audiences is something that, you know, we'll continue to look at, and I'm hoping to get more perspectives on, like the ones that Campbell provided on how those little, you know, nuances were important in that communication.
Great. Thank you. And is it Kathleen?
Maybe Caitlin. She's on the phone.
Okay.
She had to leave early.
And Lee. You can take yourself off mute for a moment. Okay, there.
Yes. Lee Hutchinson, can you hear us? If you're talking, you're muted.
We can come back to Lee.
Scott is definitely paying attention. I can see him. People looking.
How about you? Any thoughts about themes?
Yeah, Scott, we said your name. Do you have any thoughts on the themes?
I'm just trying to think through. They kind of flow down from each other in my mind, and it's like if you want to encourage plan uptake, then we want to enhance coordination. We enhance coordination by understanding stakeholders, but we probably can enhance coordination by other means. So I'm thinking of these as more of like a tree, top down. I don't know if that's correct or not, but I'm just racking my brain, and outreach is not necessarily my specialty, but I'm trying to think of other ways to enhance coordination may become another theme.
The ways, and you can think about these, that's great that you think about them like a tree, because they're not really discrete, right? They're connected. We can see how they could all be connected. So it's just a way to categorize to help you think of recommendations. That's all. So if you as a member like the idea of thinking outside these boxes, that's just fine too. So the recommendations are what we're really getting towards. The themes are just a tool to help us get there. That's good. And anybody else who didn't have a chance to speak yet, who's online? Who is a member? So Lee, if you're there, if you can unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there's Lee, okay.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. I was trying to find the chat too. I couldn't do anything there. Anyway, well, I don't have any comments.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
We'll hear from you again in a little bit. And then, is it Khadijah? Did I say it right?
That's correct, it's Khadijah.
How about for you?
I currently don't have any comments. New member, so just seeing how the themes will incorporate our goal and what's actually feasible before I can recommend any other themes.
Okay, well, welcome. I think we've covered everybody who's online. So we will stick to these 3 themes. We don't need a 4th one. And now I'd like to tell you a little bit more about how we can focus in on these 3 themes. So we'll go to the next slide and talk about encouraging plan uptake. What we're going to do right now, we're going to go through each one of these themes, diving in a little bit. If you have ideas, you can take some notes for yourself. I'm going to hand out some sticky notes right here to our 2 members in person. And I do ask, we're going to get into the tips on how to write a recommendation. But if you need to use the sticky notes or note paper as you're thinking about things, feel free to write things down, and then we'll ask you to more formally put them in chat in just a minute. So let's talk for a moment about encouraging plan uptake. What does that mean? Okay, so the description of it here, identifying sustainable outreach and engagement strategies. That's in general what encouraging plan update can be. If you have a different interpretation of that, that's fine. You can think of other ways to interpret that. Ideas as you're thinking about it, maybe questions you consider. How can we support the use of the planning products? So all of the different pieces that you have out there, everything from the plan itself to the web tools, all of the different aspects, think about how you could make those come to life more, how more people within the state of Virginia could be using them. So encouraging plan uptake, is that pretty clear? Does anybody have questions about that part? Or ideas of what that really means? Clear enough? Does anybody want coffee?
Snacks.
And we do have snacks in the room. If you have snacks near you online, you're welcome to grab those too. It's always good. So let's talk about the next theme for a moment, and that's enhancing coordination. We're working on making it that everybody can see everybody in the room and online. So for enhancing coordination, the basic theme description, strengthening relationships with key stakeholders. Enhancing coordination. Here are just a few questions you might consider. You might have others to add, but what is needed to maximize the impact of flood resilience planning and action through coordination? That's one. I'm going to ask you to practice again with your microphones as you're there. So who else should we bring to the table for coordination? And then can one of you read that 3rd question? How about Lee? Can you read that 3rd question?
You're being technology, you're challenging technology wise.
We had trouble unmuting before, so Lee, if you can unmute again. Try unmuting again, Lee, see if it works. Okay. I want to make sure we can hear you. How about Greg? Can you read that 3rd question for us?
Sure. How can engagement activities be coordinated and findings shared to avoid repeated requests for information from our stakeholders?
Great. So just another question to consider. Here is an example recommendation for enhancing coordination. Now, these are example recommendations on these slides. They are not real recommendations until you write them in here. So as a subcommittee, when we get to the recommendations later, if you like this example, go ahead and put it into the tab, put it on a sticky note so that we can recognize it and use it. But as an example, invite stakeholders to identify and engage additional potential stakeholders who can contribute to coordination efforts. That's one. Let's go on. Anybody have questions on that other? We're good, we'll keep going. And William just joined us. Welcome, William.
Thank you.
And Linda. So we're talking about different themes that can encompass recommendations going forward for outreach and communication topics for the subcommittee. So the third theme here is understanding our stakeholders, and it can be a broad theme. The basic description: improving our understanding of our key stakeholders, including their capacities and needs. So once again, I'm going to try practicing muting and unmuting for those of you who are online, and ask a couple of you to read the question, just one of the questions that's out there, or add your own question, things to consider. That's fine too. So let's ask Scott. Scott, can you go ahead and read that first question?
Hey, sure. How can we identify and support underserved communities at flood risk?
Great, thank you. And then
It looks like Lee may have corrected his involvement situation here. Lee, are you able to unmute now?
Yes, I'm sitting in for Bill, so I'm going to defer to him for any comments at this time.
Okay, thank you, Lee.
great. So at least Lee, we know that your microphone's picking it up.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my microphone here, and it looks like I'm logged in twice, so I don't know why that is either.
We'll take two of you, that's extra powerful. So, anyone else who wants to practice unmuting? I think we still have, so we have in the room now, we have Michael, we have Cameron, and we have Bill. You got Bill? And then online, virtual, we have Lee, we have Ian, we have Khadija, we have Joe, and we have Scott. And Greg. Okay.
We also have Michael Perez.
You're here on my computer. He's in the room.
Okay, he's in the room, but also online as well.
Excellent. Okay.
Great. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and read the second question. Now that we know everyone can be heard, how can we understand information about stakeholder capacities and needs to apply in future planning processes? Thinking about that question. Here's an example recommendation. Again, just an example. If you like it, you'll need to use it in a little bit. So partner with the planning district commissions on an ongoing basis to hear from localities about their capacities and gaps in assisting their underserved communities. So this gives you an idea. How do you phrase a recommendation? Okay. Any questions about how this might work? I'm going to give you some tips on the next slide. We finalized our themes. Those are going to be the three themes, the same ones that we began with, so that's great. And let's go into the next slide. Here's our brainstorm recommendations piece. Just a few points. Please write only one recommendation per sticky note if you're in person, and I will give you some sticky notes too, though. Go ahead and pass that down. And then when we also have markers, begin each recommendation with a verb. So it's an action, right? We want the recommendations to be an action. Therefore, it's not going to be something like, a stakeholder's name, for instance. That's not a recommendation. It would be involve such and such stakeholders, then it becomes a recommendation. Recommendations only apply prior to the next planning phase, so like over the next 1 to 4 years. We don't go backwards, of course, we're going forwards, but it's that gap between this plan itself and what's next. Recommendations apply to the planning process improvements as well. If you have ideas on how to do something differently, DCR definitely wants to hear that. We all want to hear that. Those could go in there too. You want to use general terms. As Carolyn mentioned, you don't want to actually say something for Virginia Department of Emergency Management itself. In general, you might say state agencies, asking state agencies to do such and such. Whatever comes to you is fine. We can always wordsmith that a little bit to make it more general. I don't want to inhibit you in any way, but we're just trying to get towards some of the more general recommendations. Okay, so the way it's going to work, if you are in chat or online, we want you to get to the chat function. Can everyone get into the chat function and enter a recommendation? Or try entering anything. You can just say hello and see if chat works. And Ian and Greg. Khadija. And go ahead if you're online. Just try to enter.
Need Lee.
We need Lee and Scott.
And Joseph L.
Go. See if you're able to enter chat. And if you can't enter chat, we can do this fun thing called talking instead of entering. And that's okay. Like this is the time to think on your own a little bit, give you space to think of a few recommendations. But if chat doesn't work, just go ahead and say them out loud. And then Cece will go ahead and enter that into chat. Yeah, Joseph is getting everything going there. Excellent. And for those who really like the English structure for sentences, he actually still did start that with an action. There's just a little phrase in front of it. Because identify is in it as an action, so it works. Okay, that's good to go. And Michael, you're here, but you're entering. Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay. This is good. Is there anyone else who needed to?
I think we have.
We got everybody working? Great. So go ahead, take the next few minutes, think on your own about recommendations and just add them in. And for Bill and Cameron, you can write them on the sticky notes. We'll have to put them up here in the room.
I think all of them. Yeah, the Al thing kind of like gets video of everybody. Oh.
There are 3 themes are back on the side, so you can think about them to help you think of the recommendations. Do turn your cameras on if you're a member. Great ideas coming through. Keep it coming. For anyone who feels like they've already thought of all the recommendations that they think they can think of, the way the human brain works, you can make a list of things and then it'll pause. At that point, what you want to do is you actually want to move. So you can turn your camera off if you want to, but if you move and you walk around the room for a second and come sit back down, or you stand up and stretch, do anything that will move a part of your body other than sitting, and you will find that your brain will reach a little deeper and you'll have more ideas.
Interesting human body.
What we're doing in the room, Rebecca and Joe are writing the recommendations that you're listing in the chat, and we're actually putting them on flip charts in the room. So we'll be able to see them in person again. So you can look in chat, you can scroll and tap to what others have written. See if that helps you to think of anything else. We'll take another couple of minutes of personal writing, then we're gonna move to the group discussion.
I just wanted to encourage everybody online in particular and folks in the room as well to look at that page 12 of the meeting materials PDF that I shared has that list of our stakeholders and their status of engagement. So whether we
Understand your statement.
have low engagement, medium engagement, high engagement, I think that might be a really helpful tool to look at and thinking about these recommendations.
Maybe you have some ideas on how to increase engagement for those who haven't been as involved. We want all recommendations that you'd like from the past, carry them forward today, put them in there anew, so that you can consider them if we're going forward with 3 to 5 recommendations by the end of the third time we meet. If you're in a room and you wrote some down, get them down, those up on the flip charts, is that working? Yeah, no. So in just a second, what we're going to do is we're going to basically split into two groups. We're going to take the group members who are here to walk around and look at what's on the flip charts and have some discussions together. And the same thing will happen with those who are online. So Cece's going to lead that online discussion. For you who are online, you can have some discussion about each of the different types of recommendations. See if you come up with any other ones or want to rephrase them. And Cece and Morgan will be able to help with that online. While Bill and Cameron and Michael, we can kind of work around the room with these three different flip charts and to see where that takes us. Again, when you're moving and doing things, different ideas flow. So we're going to launch into that, and then we'll see. That'll probably be about 15-20 minutes of discussion. We don't want anybody to get bored. So if online finishes first, we might end up finishing a little bit quicker here. We'll make sure we all blend. Everybody ready to discuss? After we do that with our two different groups of discussing, then we're going to come back together as one big group, kind of see the ahas. Some of you maybe want to convince others of why certain recommendations are really important. And then in the end, we'll do some voting. When we do vote today, it's just to get an idea. You're going to be able to choose your, see how many there are, but you might be able to choose your top 10. If there's not that many, we're going to have you choose maybe the top 5 for your own personal self. And then we'll carry those forward to the next meeting as well. Okay, any questions or comments before we start walking around? All right, so for the online folks, Morgan, do we have all of the recommendations in one spot that you can put on one whiteboard?
We're getting there. If we can just, we're gonna start with the chat as our list of recommendations, I think, and then we're gonna bring in the ones in person that our online folks can't see quite yet.
So that's why we have people here and people online. We're feeding those recommendations back and forth. So we'll be able to see all of them. But for those who are in the room, you're going to see all of the recommendations as they come through online that Rebecca's putting up for us. Okay, so we can get up and you can choose which one you want to start with. That one seems to be a little bit smaller. Let's get to that one first.
Okay, so let's go ahead and run through some of the recommendations that you all have put into chat. So there's some really good thoughts already. Does anyone want to elaborate on something that they put into the chat or piggyback on someone else's comment there? Kick off our conversation here for us.
This is Joe. I just want.
Go ahead, Joe.
I just want to amplify my comment about grant writing. So what we've come to realize in talking about some of the things, some of the initiatives we've identified, there's a whole wealth of grant opportunities, and we got to understand each other's capacities to actually, find a way to find staff or time to actually write these grants. And if there's not those resources, are there ways that this subcommittee can identify to go after for some support resources for those efforts?
Right. Very important. Does anyone have ideas that play along with that thought? Okay.
Well, in regard to the grant question or comment, right now it's kind of like grant time of the year for us at the port. So March, April, May, there's some really huge grants rolling down, especially right now with the infrastructure dollars that are coming out of the Biden administration. But so yeah, we're taking a ton of probably 5 staff members' times really be competitive in some of these areas for some of these infrastructure grants as well as environmental grants. And they're touching so many different areas, including resiliency, including workforce development, including environmental justice, and how we're interacting with disadvantaged communities. So yeah, it's a big thing, and it takes a lot of time. And then if you're successful, that's not the end, because then you have
That's
to
absolutely right. It's a good
But
problem to have, but it certainly
yeah,
creates the
but
next steps.
it takes time, and and it takes staff to do that. Um, my comment here that I added in the chat was basically I just kind of tried to bore down into one example, I guess, that you could kind of blow up into a 50,000 foot. But in my thinking, if you want to encourage use of the plan, you have to show that the plan is of value. You have to show it's of value to the stakeholders that are using it. And so one example of some really great, probably low-hanging fruit stakeholders, if we're not already doing it, is folks that work in the stormwater management departments at local governments. They're probably already tracking where we're having incidents of flooding and whether it's tidal or whether it's not tidal related. And then if you can develop a strategy with those folks, you can then take it out into the community with them. And I think it really, in a lot of cases, takes actually going into the community, whether you like to do it or not. There's people out there that love to do it, so find the right person. and that's how you got to do it. It's grinding it out, and there's no easy way. And we're going through it right now at the port, so that was kind of like an example of my thought process.
That's great. Yes. Ian, did you have something to follow that?
Like Khadijah, I'm also fairly new to Virginia, but I think I
Okay.
can use this news to leverage what other states are doing. I'd be curious to hear what the rest of the members have to say. New York has this kind of cool program called Climate Smart Communities, where communities adopt climate resilience plans and do climate mitigation and adaptation activities, and they get points. And then the DEQ, which is like, I guess the DCR, Virginia, would then certify these, and they would get these cool like bronze, silver, gold level certifications that then increases political will, because the people in the local, the mayor and that group is like, hey, we're now gold certified. That means something. That also allows them to tap into New York State funds for like grants if they want to do like electrification for EV vehicles, or they need to do some flood mitigation activities. So it's expansive. I'm just throwing that out there as an inspiration of like encouraging plan upkeep. They seem to be increasing a lot of participation in New York over the last like 4 years since the pandemic.
Yes, that's great.
So kind of backing off on Scott's, like if the plan means something that you can then tap into other funds, or you get political will recognition for doing something good.
Do you have any
Yeah, there's a
specific
lot of
thoughts?
things.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Cece, I think there's probably a lot of that similar type of framework already around in some of the NGO, like in Hampton Roads, we have the Elizabeth River Project, who has this program called River Stars. The city of Norfolk has something similar, and it's all about what Ian was just referencing. And we even do something like internally similar to that here at the port, where we have like compliance awards basically. But it all gets to building the raising the awareness and building the interest in the subject. And
That's right.
that's
That
another good
awareness and
idea.
building the interest is just of paramount importance.
Yeah.
Did any of you have ideas specifically about how to make that plan more applicable, how to show the value or share the value so that attendance, and usage can happen?
it has to be real. It cannot, and it can't be just something that sits on a shelf, obviously.
That's right.
It has to be a plan that is, folks have committed or commitment to, or have value in. So it becomes real to them and in their own localities at that point. So how do you make the plan real and, not just in Hampton Roads, but thinking, bigger statewide? And, half of my family is from the Eastern Shore of Virginia. So very rural, mostly watermen and farmers over there, but I can put myself in the place of folks potentially living in Southwest Virginia that maybe are also cut off. So,
Right.
how do you make it real for someone that lives in the valley?
Right. How do you inspire that ownership and have it really pertain on the broad, all-encompassing, across the state, as opposed to just simply coastal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would, the potential of or if it would matter even. The challenges potentially are different in different physiographic areas of the state. So does it make sense to approach the coastal plain different from the Piedmont, different from the Valley, different from the Blue Ridge?
Right.
The hazards are potentially different in those areas based on the physiography. So then you might, maybe we can bore down then into understanding more. Well, I don't know. I don't know what all the hazards are in the valley. I can maybe guess, but I've never lived there. And that's why it's so important to, I think, get into the community and talk to those folks that are working there, and then the folks that are actually living there. Sometimes it's one and the same.
The folks there that are responding to those incidents, whether it's stormwater, river flooding, or other hazards in their areas. So it seems striking a balance with how granular this plan actually gets.
Yeah. Oh.
Key success factor.
Yeah.
We have a few of you we haven't heard from. Would anyone else like to chime in on this topic or any other? I'm not sure. So is Will Eisenberg? Will, are you online with us, or are you also in the room in person but online?
I am online. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any thoughts on what we've discussed here so far, or any other ideas on different recommendations?
Just kind of picking up on some of the things that have been said, and a common thing that I hear in a lot of this is, it's great to have this stuff in place, but because groups are so capacity strapped, be it local governments, nonprofits, community groups, whatever, they're so capacity strapped that it's hard to fully engage with something. So kind of the theme that keeps popping up of making it worthwhile, having, if you have regular engagement meetings, having that tied to some sort of a way of getting more plugged into this, or just providing value somehow for those groups. That's what's just been bouncing around my mind as I've heard these conversations, is the hard piece of how do you make it so that there's extra incentive for those groups that are capacity strapped to get involved and be plugged in.
Absolutely. It can be so difficult even for those that are very much wanting to be involved to pull themselves away to become involved.
Yeah.
That's a good point, because what Will was saying can drive that political desire to make a change. If you're not meeting regularly and you don't have the support of your constituents, then you're not going to go very far. But if you want to compete for grants at the state or federal level, and if you want to compete for even more state dollars from your own potential pot of money, then it's good to have friends, lots of
That's right.
friends.
How do we make new friends? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a good one. Parties are always good for that. You know, like
Food. Providing
party.
food always helps.
Yeah. Conferences.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on what Scott was saying and what Will was saying. I think a common thing that I'm hearing is value, for the different people. If you're going to get, acceptance and usage, people have to identify with it somehow on a personal level. There has to be value to it, kind of what's in it for me.
Right.
And then, talking about, kind of the geographic variance of the message, having local ambassadors. I just came back from being out in Hawaii working on the Lahaina wildfires, and we had local kahunas out there, which basically translates to wise man out in Hawaii. And you didn't think about having a new initiative or a new project or something like that without the kind of the figurative and literal blessing, from a local kahuna. I mean, we had blessing ceremonies and things like that as we were going into different areas, and just having that, awareness of those local ambassadors and having their acceptance kind of helps people overall identify and accept and have value in the things that you're trying to do. So as we're rolling out a plan, linking up with those folks, or at least identifying them, and they could be folks within an NGO or community folks, or even workers on the local government side, letting them know what's in the plan and what's in it for them, and being able to give them kind of key messages to be able to tell people if why should they look at it, why should they be involved.
Yes. Thank you for that perspective, Greg. That's an incredible it's an incredible visual, even the blessing of the change and of the plan forward. It's excellent.
If I may just kind of add maybe more as the direction of a specific recommendation, and the challenge with this will go back to the how do you provide value here. But I know with the phase 1 there was the idea of having the funding database that ties to the projects database. As you go through the projects and you put them in there, based on the characteristics of those projects, specific funding would be identified. I think speaking of the capacity issue, it's always best if you can go to other people's meetings, ask to be invited or included in those meetings, but be a part of their meetings that they already have standing. But to my knowledge, there's really no central database or central list of where are these recurring community meetings, where are these recurring group meetings. And how you want to scale that, who you want to include in that, definitely complicates the matter. But that would be riddled with the same issue as the funding database, in that once you get it put together, who's going to update it? So I keep thinking about these, how do you add value there? If there's a way to get groups to add to that gets them value in another way, or to update that gets them value in another way, that would be something worth exploring, because that would be an incredibly valuable database for these efforts and many other efforts, but definitely for the efforts of and trying to connect people to the plan and know what's going on among all the different partners.
Yes, definitely. Scott, it looked like you may have had some thoughts on that as he started talking there. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, I totally agree. And it's not easy always to find community contacts, especially if, luckily in the Hampton Roads area, most of the city websites have relatively accurate lists, not 100% accurate. But you at least have typically enough information to get who you need to get to, but they don't obviously include community groups like church groups, for example. One great example of this is the city of Newport News. The areas where we're looking at doing community outreach, there are no civic leagues. We have Black leaders in the community that are running community engagement of their own, either out of churches or out of other public buildings. And if you want to get into that community, those are the guys you got to talk to. And so you're absolutely right. It's rough. It's rough. And I'm from the Hampton Roads area, but I'm not from the other areas. I'm not from Richmond. And so I don't know, who are the community leaders on the south side of Richmond that we would need to talk to outside of Richmond Marine Terminal. I mean, I know that now because we've done our research, but it takes time. And I actually hired an intern to do this for me last summer. And so it didn't take the entire internship, obviously, to do it, but they were doing other environmental justice work for us. And so, yeah, we planned it. That's how we got what we needed to get. But from a statewide perspective, that's huge. And it's not there, and it would be great if it was. And then it's like, yeah, how do you keep it updated?
Yes. Maintaining something like that is definitely a key success factor, but just getting it going in the first place would be enormously helpful.
Yeah, it would be nice if the state had, I don't know, if there is an organization or a department at the state level that even maybe tracks information of that nature in some kind of shareable format like GIS, or I don't know, some kind
Probably.
of social services type department, maybe human services. I don't know.
Mhm.
The closest thing that I know of to that would be the environmental justice coordinators at DEQ.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how plugged in they are to this. I sent them an email just to kind of check on that, but I know they have contact lists that very similarly to, I'm sure, how your intern did it. They've just been kind of building over time, going out, doing what you have to do to get it. But I don't think it's, mapped or anything like that, or particularly public.
It would be interesting if even like Virginia Warren or, the water and wastewater utilities could be leveraged for the information that they have with resources in their individual, service areas and geographic areas. Wonder if there's some sort of way that a connection could be made there to gather information. Then again, there's the issue of bandwidth and capacity that everyone struggles with. So getting information and involvement is difficult from multiple sides, but. Well, let's see. So if we go back to the themes, encouraging plan uptake, but also enhancing coordination, understanding stakeholders. Our discussions have sort of bounced around those themes. Short reels for the scrollers. Social media, definitely a huge opportunity. So it sounds like we'll be voting. So if we could sort of summarize some actual recommendations here.
Oh, it looks like we actually are going to vote after CC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
In
great.
between meetings. So after this meeting concludes and before the next subcommittee meeting.
Oh, fantastic. Do you know how much longer we have here in the separate conversation?
I don't. Let me check.
Okay. I know that a couple of you are, as you've said, new and doing more listening than speaking, but please feel free to share any thoughts or questions that could provoke additional conversation as well. Don't be shy.
Yeah, I don't know anything about any of this stuff. I'm an environmental guy. I don't do resilience. I don't do public outreach. I take water samples. That's my background.
Yep, that's all right. You have some great,
Always.
great thoughts though and
Ready to
feedback.
say
So,
something. Yeah, because I'm not going to chop your head off. That's for sure.
no, we encourage all thoughts and questions and comments.
It's funny
The
the positions you pick up and titles you pick up the longer you're in the field.
Yes. Go ahead, Morgan.
It sounds like we can rejoin the in-person group whenever we like. Should I let
Okay.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I think so, unless Khadijah or Ian or anyone else that's a member have any final thoughts here before we rejoin.
Let's rejoin in 3 minutes, just for coordination purposes.
Okay, right at past. Sounds great.
I like the commitment to plain English. I know that flood mitigation can be a really technical, jargony field, and so trying to simplify that as much as possible. For example, like a flood mitigation evaluation is often used to like 30% of the project cost, but if you just say flood study, everyone understands what you're talking about.
Right, common terminology is important.
That's great. No, we didn't,
And,
for the recommendations that made it into chat, we didn't have folks categorize them from the start. So I put them in places I thought they belonged, but if you see any that have to shuffle to a different column, please let me know.
I can see the text, but I cannot read it. It's not large enough to read. Is that the same for the others of you, or are you able to actually see that large enough to read? No, it's microscopic for us, Morgan.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Mhm.
I want it all to show so I can zoom in a little
Starting to
bit.
show.
For Bill and Michael, would you be willing
Okay,
to be
they're bringing
able
us
to
back
point
into
out
the big group.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, everyone.
once we get back together? Okay. But we are ready to go. Well, we can wait for Cameron to come back.
Linda, we are ready to join back into the main group.
I can't hear anything. Is anything happening?
Oh, great question, Will. Let me confirm.
We're rejoining you.
We're hoping to. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I was muted again. We can hear you.
So how was all the conversation? It looked
We had some,
lively.
yes, we had some great conversation and bounced around the various themes.
So we decided here what would be best to do, because we've got about 9 minutes. And so in those 9 minutes, we're going to have some group discussion about priority recommendations, just ahas that came to you on the virtual team and us in the in-person team. And then we'll follow up later to do kind of a voting on prioritization of different recommendations, just because we seem to have so many, and some of them overlap, so we might be able to coalesce a few into specific statement recommendations. So you will see a survey sometime that comes to your email, and we just ask that sometime in the next few weeks, you take a look at that survey and do the voting on it. We'll send out some instructions. So we don't need to take time for voting today, but let's just dive in. And let's hear from the virtual group. Any ahas, anything you really wanted to point out as you were discussing?
And I'll just preface the virtual group by saying anyone virtual for whom this whiteboard is tough to read, you should be able to zoom in to make it as big as you like on your end. But if not, sorry about that. We're working on the tech.
Thank you, Morgan. I see that is working. Hopefully that works for
Yeah.
the others as well. Okay, excellent. Scott or anyone else, would you like to share any ahas from our conversation?
And we can do it a little bit by theme. So we can start with encourage plan uptake. You all can give some input and then we'll give some input here.
Okay.
Well, what I had put in mind was basically an example of how we could encourage the use of the plan by coordination and education, essentially, and outreach. So the example that I put up there was, I think it's listed in the first column. It looks like number 1D, but it's basically, if we need to show value of the plan for the critical stakeholders. And one way we can potentially do that is by coordinating with local government entities like your stormwater management divisions. They already know likely where the flooding is coming from and the potential cause, whether it's tidal or other incidental flooding, maybe riverine. And then you can target your education and outreach around those areas that are already experiencing flooding. It's a good likelihood that at least in the Hampton Roads area, that some of those areas are going to be disadvantaged or even considered environmental justice neighborhoods. So that's one method, but I think you could apply that coordination piece to other types of outreach or to other types of organizations. Maybe it's an NGO instead, like down here at the Elizabeth River Project, for an example, is they have a strong resiliency footprint here now in the Hampton Roads area, as well as a lot of other environmental work they've done in the watershed. So they could be, essentially inserted into that kind of formula. So anyway, that was my brainiac moment of the day.
It's excellent, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else online want to mention for this first category? Encouraging plan uptake. So here, how about from our group, encouraging plan uptake? What were some of the ahas we had?
Well, perhaps one, and it'll apply to the others as well, is agency coordination. We have agency representation on the TAC, so they need to be responsible for making sure the agencies are informed and held accountable as well.
Okay, let's go to the enhancing coordination, which in some of these topics, some of the recommendations fall in both categories.
Yeah.
You can go ahead with your comment that you've put in chat if you'd like.
Ian, are you able to unmute?
Yes, sorry, I did not hear my name.
Oh,
Mine is for the next one. It's for understanding our stakeholders. I can wait for
okay.
Okay, so we'll wait for a second. Thanks for that. So enhancing coordination. what are your thoughts from the virtual group about enhancing coordination? Any ahas?
We
or
had-
recommendations?
I'm not sure if we got to any specific ahas. We had some good conversation about the importance of enhancing coordination, some ideas on different ways to involve different groups. But overall, just the theme of how tremendously important the coordination is and involving the different groups with different workshops or meetings that could be participated in, existing community meetings and such, even religious organizations and different folks that have large community engagement but are not vocalizing or participating as of yet.
Yeah, for me, it all comes back to value, showing the value of the plan to that particular group that you're coordinating with. So if it's a church group, maybe they're interested in one thing, whereas a neighborhood or that has $1 million homes may be interested in one thing, and an environmental justice neighborhood may be interested in something totally different. So if you can identify the value of the plan for those folks that you're talking to, and then represent that to them, that could be an approach.
Great. And I know here, one of the themes matching theirs is meet people where they are. That came up in this discussion. Good. So the last couple minutes, let's talk about understanding our stakeholders. Ian, you want to give us some insight?
An idea was committing to plain English. Example I used, often you hear flood mitigation evaluation to describe like the survey to up to 30% of a project cost. But if you just say flood study, everyone understands what's going on. So trying to simplify and speak as plainly as possible. And the other thing was just identifying who is most at risk for Virginia specifically. I know Texas had identified men between 15 and 30, specifically car owners doing risky low water crossings. And we're trying to identify and do outreach to mitigate those risk-taking decisions.
Anything from our in-person group on understanding our stakeholders?
Hey, Gregory, on the virtual group, I don't know if you'd be willing to share your kahuna story, but I thought that was pretty impactful.
Absolutely. Please share that with the group.
Well, I was going to say my biggest aha moment was finding out that Scott does water sampling. So, yeah.
We do have 1 minute here. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. I was trying to relay. I was out in Hawaii recently doing work on the Lahaina wildfires, and just understanding who the local ambassadors are, who literally the kahunas are out there. Before we went out and we introduced an idea or started a new project, I identified those people and linked with them, and we actually had blessings before we started a new phase of debris clearing or building a school or whatever it was that we were doing out there. And by doing that, you got buy-in from the community. People respected that person. They knew what was in it for them. And automatically they found the value that Scott was talking about, because there's a, kind of a shared understanding and trust that's built with that, just by having that person involved. So I think, as we're going into different areas, different communities, sometimes different groups get, lost actually in a municipality, because we're pretty sophisticated in messaging in the larger urban areas, but there are silos of information depending on where you are in a community. We've somewhat found this out in the Norfolk Coastal Storm Risk project, where we had an EJ community over on south side of Norfolk. It wasn't that we didn't reach out and try to get information, but maybe we could have done a better job of figuring out who those local ambassadors were through partnering with the city of Norfolk, and them having a better understanding of who those folks were, what the method was of communicating with them. We kind of went with a more flat, than very media outreach when we were going through the project for that. But
Thank you.
sure.
Thanks, Frank. I need to wrap up our section right now. We're going to go to public comment.
At this moment, unless I missed something, that there is no one has expressed an interest for public comment. If that's wrong, please speak up now. Oh, we do have one. Would you like to say your name now, or I can read it? Your call. Okay, so the question is how are, oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, if you could read it, that would be ideal.
Happy to do that. And I'm sorry, I don't know your first name.
Marquila.
Michaela Moore asked the question, how are localities invited to locality meetings? Do you start with the city manager or council members or council members? I don't know who would answer that.
I can answer that. So it kind of depends on the locality. In many cases, DCR already has standing relationships with the floodplain administrators and other local government staff. And so we might reach out to them directly. If we don't have those relationships, we might go to the city manager or other kind of leadership within the city first. But where we do have relationships, we try to build those and work from those, as well as keeping the leadership informed.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public would like to speak? I think we can conclude the public comment period.
Thank
you. Go back to your meeting.
I'm going to turn it back to Linda just to kind of wrap up the discussion here, and then I'll talk about action items and next steps for our next meetings.
Great. And so we had a lot of good discussion about recommendations, both in person and virtually. So thank you for being so interactive. And with all of the different recommendation pieces, we'll be able to pull those together and provide some kind of a survey. When you get that survey, please do respond. That's the most challenging thing. It's great to vote when we're all in person because you'll take the time to do it. We understand how busy you are. So we'll just promise that it will take you probably less than, probably about 90 seconds to actually vote when we send it to you. So it's not going to be something that'll take a long time. And I would just like to ask if anybody has any comments or ideas or anything that came through this process today. How do you feel about these recommendations? How do you feel about the interaction? Is there any thought that you have about going forward? Anything at all?
Good job, everybody.
Okay, turn it back to you.
Okay, well, just before we close, are there any other topics that any members of the subcommittee would like to address separately of the subcommittee recommendations? I know we're recommendationed out. Okay. All right, well, let's move on to next steps. So aside from completing the survey that you'll receive electronically, as Linda kind of already described the next steps for the recommendations, so I won't go into further detail on those. I will say that our next meeting, we will continue to provide you all updates on the progress of implementing the outreach and engagement strategy for this plan. So we're continuing to seek input and seek participation from a variety of stakeholders implementing our outreach and engagement strategy, and we'll keep you all informed on that progress and process. We'll also be sending probably some follow-up information via email regarding that planning process. Mentioned earlier in the meeting that AECON is developing our public outreach campaign for this plan for the remainder of the year and beyond. So we'll look forward to sharing that information with you, as well as kind of part of that, developing a list of underserved communities at flood risk with whom we want to meet before the end of the year. So I know there was a lot of discussion about that, questions about how we can do that today, and we are actively working on it. So want to keep you all in the loop and let you all have the opportunity to provide feedback. We were hoping to do that during our meeting today. Unfortunately, the timing of signing the contract didn't allow for that to happen today, which I think is okay, because we use plenty of time for recommendations development. But we will follow up on that via email, so you can all have an opportunity to see and provide comments. Otherwise, let's continue our discussion at the next meeting, and just a reminder that the next full meeting of the Coastal Resilience Technical Advisory Committee is on June 18th. It is an all virtual meeting. So please make sure you have that on your calendar. If you don't, reach out to us at DCR and we'll make sure you get the invitation. And with that, that's all I've got. I think we can move to adjourn.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Good